Hi, people. This is DJ.
This is Ish.
And this is
Season
season 3
3
of Pero Let Me Tell You.
Oye, mi gente, this is Ish. Now, we know that everybody out there is doing the self-quarantine, shelter thing. No, ya yo ni sé qué decir, cómo se la cosa. So, actually, Darian and I are going to be conducting the intro to our interview, our episode, actually, via phone. This is the first time we've ever done this, so let's see how this goes. It's very, very odd for us. We're used to just, being in front of each other and always reacting off of each other. So let's see how this goes.
Hello.
Aló.
Hi.
¿Qué haces?
Well, right now I actually was finished flossing my teeth,
Well,
because coronavirus and all, but dental hygiene is important.
Dental hygiene is very important. I mean, Vivian taught us that, if nothing else.
If nothing else, right?
Yes.
Is this our quarantine special episode 102?
Kind of, sort of, although I like quarantine better. It sounds like a country song.
Well, here we go, everybody. You caught me by surprise. I mean, I knew we were going to do this, but I thought you were going to set me up a little bit. So here I am, flossing.
Now,
everybody,
welcome
to this special edition episode.
But why would you think I was going to set you up if I never set you up when we start recording? Like, legitimately, I always catch you off guard.
That is true. That is very true. That is very true. So to our listeners out there, not even the coronavirus is going to stop us from bringing you a new episode every week.
Nope. If I wind up on a ventilator, they're just going to have to figure out how to sneak a recorder in there.
Yeah. Oh my God. No. Yo no quiera, pero it's like at that point in time, like, I don't know. I will do a solo, but damn it, we are gonna have an episode every week.
Not even. Listen, I'll just teach you how to do all this stuff, and then we have many people who'll be more than happy to join you via phone to co-host.
Oh well, yeah. So welcome to the quarantine world, everybody.
Yes, we're
¿Cómo está todo el mundo?
Shelter in placing.
Now, so because, our audience, we're like family at this point. Right. The truth is that we actually have like a little bit, half of the episode we actually shot in person with our co-host, Cubano Chris, who we'll talk about in a minute. Yep. But Ish and I kind of wanted to quarantine ourselves since everybody else is quarantined, and kind of do this.
I mean, everybody
kind of see how
so we're relatable, right? It's like, listen, this is what everybody's going through.
Exactly. You know what this feels like to me?
What?
Right now, this conversation we're having.
Okay.
Like in the 80s and the 90s, before, when you would call Cuba, because now when you call Cuba, you call on a calling card, so it's super easy. But in the 80s and the 90s, I would be the one who would have to call for like my grandmother. Oh. And it was always the same. Recording. Todas las líneas aquí están ocupadas. Por favor, trate de llamar más tarde. And I would try for hours and hours. And then, finally, when you get somebody on the line and they hook you up to whoever you're calling in Cuba, it would be like a screaming match. Tia! Go with Tia! And it's like, why were we screaming so much? Like, I don't understand.
Lots of static. Static has always been the enemy.
No. And we would be like, Tia! ¿Cómo está Carlito? Apúrate antes que corten la llamada! Because those Cuba calls back in the day, they would just like cut them. You know what I mean? They wouldn't.
Oh yeah.
They wouldn't,
they wouldn't tell you ahead of time. It was just like you were in the middle of a conversation. Y ahí llegó.
Yeah, well, I would love when my grandmother's sister, may she rest in peace, she had a bit of a, not a big mouth, but she didn't know when to stop. She had no filter. Okay. And then when, she would start talking about something that could be government related, we would be like, Tia!
No, no.
Tia! And then it's funny because And they would speak again, screaming and in a hurry. Tía, ¿cómo está Carlito? ¿Cómo está Nora? ¿Cómo están los muchachos?
It's like when you would, when people used to call home collect, but they wouldn't actually call collect. So you would have to be able to say your name. When they would ask you for your name, it'd be like, Mom, Dad, I'm done with the movie. Come pick me up. Like, and then, that's how it would.
Wow, that's something that I completely forgot about until you mentioned it now. Calling collect.
Yeah.
Do you remember the 90s? All those calling collect commercials? I feel that like
Ava Save-A-Lot.
Calling collect made like one last ditch effort before it died.
You know what? And that's the power of Alyssa Milano.
I know, but that she was Ava Save-A-Lot.
Ava Save-A-Lot, yeah.
She was wearing like a little leather outfit.
Well, I mean, come on, it's Alyssa Milano. Who doesn't want Alyssa Milano in letter? So it's spectacular.
And then in the Cuba calls, it would always be like, I would always like set up the call, but once we connected, right, then obviously I would give the phone to my grandmother or my mom. Mm-hmm. But I don't really know like the family that we had left in Cuba was like my grandmother's sister and like her family. Right. So it wasn't close family. I didn't really know these people. And it'd be like, Darien, ven, pa que habla con tu tía. And it's like, I don't know what to say.
Especially at that age. Like, I don't have anything to talk about as it
is. It'd be like, mijito, tú estás grande, como has crecido, because my grandmother would send them pictures. I'd be like, sí, gracias. Do you have food? Like,
okay.
I don't know.
Speaking of, do you have food? Are you stocked up?
I'm stocked up. So everybody, I know everybody's gone crazy, like buying stuff. Let me tell you about my little Publix.
Let me tell you something though. I was the first one to make fun of like the toilet paper thing, and you know what? Today,
let me tell you.
Today, I'm like one roll down. Like I had to go and I couldn't find toilet paper. So basically I'm going to do like Charo in that video she posted on Instagram where I just bought a big ass pack of paper towels and I'm just going to start cutting that shit in half.
Or now going to the shower.
Well, yeah, but like let's call that plan B. Like you just have backups.
Plan B. So I don't want to alarm our listeners, but I heard through two credible sources. I don't know if this is going to be true because sometimes even credible sources hear rumors, and even though they're the most credible source,
right? Especially
what they heard is a rumor.
Like this, so también, especially
right. But I heard from two sources today that there may be like a federal lockdown similar to what they did in San Francisco.
Okay.
Because in San Francisco,
and what is the impact
very
of
different.
That? Yeah.
Well, the impact of that is that you can't leave your house unless it's for either an emergency situation or to go to like the doctor or
the grocery
like I
store,
think the
right?
supermarket,
yeah.
The grocery store. Similar to what they did in Italy. In Italy, people are not supposed to leave their houses.
No.
So there's a rumor that they might do that. And so, these two sources called me and they told me, listen, if this happens, this may happen. Mm-hmm. So if you think it got crazy in the supermarket now,
right?
If that's announced, it's going to get even more crazy. So again, I don't want to start,
Yeah, like we're not trying to. Did they say more or less when they thought it would happen?
No. I took this as a grain of salt. I was like, you know what? Better to be a little bit prepared because I've tried to be level-headed in this whole situation.
Right.
So I said, let me go to Publix, and because the other day I went grocery shopping big time. But I'm like, let me go today, to get a lot of non-perishable items.
Right.
Especially since now there's kids that are out of school.
See, they're home all day.
It changes the game. It changes the game completely.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, let me make sure that for Tristan, I get a lot of mac and cheese and stuff like that, non-perishable items.
Right.
But the funny thing was that here I am at Publix and, the whole meat aisle is gone.
It's all gone.
Right?
It's all gone.
It's all gone. Except right in the middle, there's maybe 3 feet and 3 feet long of meat, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I got strange that in this whole enormous long aisle of meat, there's this patch in the middle that has meat, and nobody's picked it up.
It's liver and
when I go, it was New York strip steak. like ribeye steak,
lo más
filet
caro.
mignon. It was like $35-$40. I'm like, oh, okay.
Ahí se va a podrir.
Okay. Ay, porque Chico, you know, I don't know about you, but you know, it's to be quarantined and have a New York strip steak. It's like, coño. You don't want to have such a good piece of meat when you're quarantined.
It's like,
when you're quarantined, you want to have like picadillo.
Actually, you know, it's funny you say that because I am actually this weekend I'm gonna make Seth's burger beef frita recipe, but the problem is that I couldn't find like picadillo carne de res, so I had to get ground turkey, and I feel like that's gonna make me like dead to him. That I'm making his frita recipe with ground turkey, but you know what, Seth? It's what they had. It's what they had. Okay.
Seth is like you know, Saint Burger Beast to us. So you got to make him proud. No, you know what though? Tomorrow on Pero Friday. Well, no, it's Pero Friday now. Today. Since it's Pero Friday, try to go to Publix early because Publix sets shipments of meat every morning.
Oh, okay. Wow. And it sells out?
They do.
Damn.
They do. And they actually have a lot of ground beef because the other day I went and they had a ton of ground beef. The thing is that by the time you get home, you know, from work, it's gone.
I'm actually one of the ones who's working from home. I've actually, you know, been working from home this entire week.
Okay, so let's talk about that because that's something that our listeners are definitely, everybody's feeling that pain today, that adjustment. So my situation is a little bit different because, you know, I'm self-employed. So, you know, I'm not your typical like office worker, you know, that I can work remotely. So how has it been like for you?
Ooh, child, it's been interesting. Okay, again, I have in the past always had opportunities to work from home because I work in advertising marketing. So, you know, sometimes we travel, we have to work from remote and all that.
Yes, how you made it clear in 102 episodes.
Listen, me and Amanda Woodward, which by the way, that's my new goal during quarantine is to rewatch all of Melrose Place. But, well, I've got time.
Tony Rodriguez from Spanish Aki Presents. This will be your chance.
Catch up, Tony.
This will be your chance, just saying.
So, you know, I working from home is nothing new for me, but like this extended period of time is what's different, you know, because before it was like I would travel for work, right? So, okay, I'm out of the office for like a day or two. But this is like, okay, well, minimum, we know we're going to be out 2 weeks because that's what the company has said. And it probably is going to be longer, quite honestly. But it's like, before, you know, you would just walk over to people and be like, hey, you know, have a question or blah, blah. Now it's all through like instant messenger. So now it's all through chat. And sometimes a person's not there. And then when they come back, you know, you may not be there or you may be on a conference call. And no, but now you have to follow up on something. It's so like, I like it. I'm not going to say I don't. I like it because I love the fact that I can just roll out of bed in my underwear, sit at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and be working. Like, this is not...
And be shirtless, of course.
Well, I mean, of course, that's a given.
Right, it's you.
It is me.
Whereas I would probably be in a hoodie, sweatpants, you know.
You, even at home, would be like in a hazmat suit. Yeah. Well, es que también con el frío que hace aquí en tu casa, you know, you would have to be in a hoodie.
Yeah.
But it's just... But what I found fascinating, though, is that they had us all do a training of work from home. And it's just like... I already did it, but it's like, what is there to train? You know, realistically speaking, it's just like you open your laptop, you do what you got to do anyway at the office, but now you're just doing it on your couch or, you know, or wherever. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. But I got to say, that's nothing compared to all you parents out there who are dealing with the homeschooling. Well,
before we get to the, you know, at home school, you know, it's funny because like on Instagram, on both pero let me tell you, Instagram and my personal Instagram, you know, everybody's been posting about working at home and all that stuff, and everybody's like complaining about it, and I'm like, be careful what you wish for.
Yes, exactly. Because before you know what, we're going to be back in the office.
I've always thought that like working at home, I think it's great, like somebody like you or a lot of companies that like you have the option of certain days working at home, or if like it could be a combination, but you still have those days in the office because I think it's also healthy to step out of your environment and, you know, adults, you know, Yeah, unless you just work in a miserable place.
Well, then, yeah, you should just look to get another job at that point.
I mean, I've worked in miserable places that when I would sit in the car, like, you know, that little law firm I worked in some years ago, that law firm, that when I would sit in the car, I'd like take a sigh and be like, another day.
You just have to brace yourself for it. You just gotta like.
But yeah, it's like be careful what you wish for. I don't know. I think this whole working from home thing. I mean, I feel it's like a Band-Aid on a wound because it's like how productive. I mean, certain people and certain things could certainly be as productive, but I feel other ones are kind of like. Well, okay, what are you really?
I get what you're saying, but I think, you know, the fact that I have to give it to certain companies, right? The fact that they're looking for that alternative so that people can continue to work at least and maintain some semblance of normalcy. I think that is very important because especially if what you're saying, you know, may come to pass, does come to pass, where you're just like, you're literally like, hey, you cannot leave your house. And you don't even have something to kind of distraite, because listen, I love, you know, watching TV and movies and all that as much as the next person. But at a certain point, cansa. You know, at a certain point, you're just like, how many times can I watch, you know, X program on Netflix or whatever? So it's hard.
I could do that. I just watch Suits all the time because I've told you that Suits is the show that I have in the background. Like if I'm cleaning the house, I have Suits on. Well, if I'm like organizing my closet, I have Suits on. Because as I've told you and I've spoken about on the episode, I am like deathly afraid of silence. So I gotta have something on.
Well, I mean, I relate. I have my Law and Order SVU, you know, in the background, but even that, after a while, I'm just like, oh my god, enough rape.
oh my god. no con las violaciones.
You know.
But anyway, yes, with you know, going back now to all the kids that are homeschooled, it's, I mean, look, I think that, you know, you're seeing a lot of memes online of people saying like, oh, you know, I'm homeschooling my kids and teachers deserve all the money in the world. It's like, yeah, of course they do. You know, like this is something that we've known for quite some time, you know, that teachers are really underpaid.
Yeah, ahora te están pisando gallo a ti, so yeah. And I will say, for those of you who are, I mean, and there may be other people doing this, but on Instagram, former guest and friend of the podcast, Lucy Lopez, her Instagram handle is at the Lucy Lopez.
Hi, Lucy.
She has asked teachers to send her short clips of, you know, ways to manage this whole homeschooling thing, like, you know, tips and tricks and things to help parents understand what's the best ways to approach it. So if you guys have a chance, you know, check her out on Instagram. She's been posting those stories, and igual que ella, like, there's a lot of people out there. I will say, I mean, this understatement of the year, this sucks that we're all having to go through this, but it is on some weird level nice to see people kind of coming together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's sad that it took this. It's sad that we couldn't just do this, you know, on a Wednesday. But you know, it's nice.
It took a
pandemic, you know.
Yeah. No, you know the thing with children, because you know, with Tristan, I've asked all like this week. I'm like, how's he doing with the home learning? You know, right. How's he doing? And you know, he's been doing fine. But the thing is that concerns me about him and, you know, all kids is that this is going to be going on at least a month. And these kids have no type of social interaction. And it's not like they could now go out somewhere because they can't, you know. So it's going to be, we're going to have to get creative on how we keep all these kids entertained,
especially,
to a certain extent,
especially for kids without siblings. Because, bueno, por lo menos if you, you know, if you've got brothers and sisters, I mean, theoretically, at least there's another kid in the house, you know, to kind of bounce off.
And then Tristan now is forbidden to go to my parents' house because my grandmother is there. So anyway, so let's talk about that for a little minute. So I posted today. A lot of the listeners probably saw it. My video of how I visited my grandmother. It was like coming up through a drive-through.
It was like a drive-through in wartime. It was like, lo único que le faltaba a tu abuela was, you know, the little handkerchief to be waving at you from, you know, the pier.
I was like, Nina! Me! And then, it's funny because I thought away. I'm like, I wasn't 6 feet away. I was like 60 feet away. I'm like, I could have gotten closer.
Yeah, but where's the fun in that? Where's the fun in that?
Yeah. But then it's funny because, my grandmother's 93, so she can't really, scream.
Right.
So it'd be like, Mia! And then, she'd say something, and then my aunt would scream at me, So it was just really interesting.
It was like
the
world's loudest game of telephone.
Oh, yeah. Oye, oíste that Netflix, they're asking Netflix to reduce their content rate. Oye, esa fuera como if now the internet breaks. Kim Kardashian needs to stay away from the internet.
Post nothing, Kim. Nothing. None of you. None
Yes,
of you
Kardashian
Jenners.
Okay, dealing with a pandemic and with a broken internet? No. That's too much to handle. No. So it was really funny today because so my office, we were open officially until today. Next week, we're going to be reduced. We're going to take turns coming in. We're just going to be there a couple of hours because the thing is that the phone rang once today. So, and clients aren't coming in. I feel, with my line of work, adjusters are kind of trying to figure it out too, and all that stuff. So it's very little movement. So we're gonna go. Each one of us is gonna go in every day, and we also have an emergency number. If somebody's having an emergency, they can call us.
Right.
So we're all gonna take turns coming in each day for a few hours, check the mail, and all that. But it's funny because today, while I was driving among the wonderful la ciudad de Hialeah, I'm like, mira que easy está todo, no hay tráfico. El Home Depot de la 16, la 49 no es un desastre because that Home Depot, the one on 16th and 49th, that always looks like a bomb fell there. There's so many people in that Home Depot, and I'm like, coño, there's a Lowe's down the street.
Well, but Lowe's is more expensive.
Right, no, pero the Lowe's is in the corner. Hialeah has this little block that I told you about, that it's magical. It has Lowe's, Target, Robex, and Applebee's. And when you go to that little corner,
I know that corner.
Long in Hialeah, right?
Yeah.
So that's by my office. So today I was driving around and I'm like, oh my God, no hay tráfico, no hay gente por la calle. It's another world. It's another world. So actually, you know what? On a kind of, it's hard to say positive notes because,
that's what we do here, positivity.
But I've read a lot, and people could see it online, that especially in Europe, Europe has been going through this longer than we have, and they did these travel bans and these lockdowns before we did. For example, Venice hasn't had tourists in already a few weeks,
right.
And it's nothing, no cruise ships, no tourists, and the waters have completely cleared up, the pollution is gone, and over China always has this enormous cloud of pollution over it. The cloud is virtually gone.
The solution was clearly just kill population over there, I guess, is what we're saying.
Oh my God.
I mean, they had to get really extreme over there for the air quality to improve.
I know. You know what's kind of a little bit, I don't know, kind of a finger in the face of society, of world society, is that Latin America and Africa, there have been cases, but they have been spared the brunt of the coronavirus.
That's true.
It's been more towards, obviously, I don't even want to say developed countries because in Latin America there's plenty of developed countries.
Yeah.
But they haven't gotten the brunt of it. It's screw you.
We'll show you who's third world.
It's poor Africa. I feel the worst things happen in Africa. I mean, they don't get the coronavirus. They get Ebola, which liquefies your insides. And whatever.
I guess what you're saying is it could be worse.
Oh my gosh! Speaking of worse, now that we said something better. Speaking of worse, Today I saw this report. It's actually all over the news and on online that your favorite people, millennials and zillennials, are partying like it's 1999 in South Beach. What I thought was funny was that they were defiant. They were like, "Oh, we don't care. We're young, and we get sick, whatever."
Yeah, and the sentiment was just like, this is my vacation. Like, it's like an inconvenience for me. It's like, yeah, I'm so sorry that a pandemic ruined your ability to get drunk on your 21st birthday, Becky. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and I think that the worst thing about that is that over and over and over, they say on the news that the most dangerous aspect of this disease is that there's a lot of people who are asymptomatic, who are not showing symptoms, but yet those people can spread it to other people. Yeah. So it's not a situation of like, I feel healthy, I don't have it, so I'm okay. No, you could certainly have the virus and pass it on to somebody who's not going to be okay. Yeah, and I know, and you're not talking about going to somebody's house with a few people. You're talking about these people are still in South Beach, hundreds of people together, and I mean, it's just like that. That is irresponsible. That is irresponsible because I give a little bit of leeway to people that have cabin fever or maybe have like a small gathering of under 10 people, let's say, because they're going crazy.
Or go on a bike ride around the block or something,
That's one thing. Right. But it's like, yeah, let's party in spring break. Yeah, spring break, bro. Spring break 2020, bro. It's like, oh, yeah.
Exactly.
So...
Yeah,
we hope, like, we wanted to do something funny for you guys out there, to our listeners. A lot of you actually have... gotten back to us or made comments like, are we still going to be doing the podcast? A lot of you have been like, oh my God, you guys make me laugh, so please keep doing it. We're going to keep doing the podcast. I mean, we did this whole Skype thing again, kind of to bring a little bit of humor to the matter, although we obviously know that this is a very serious thing. Yeah. And we're not trying to take away any of the severity of it, but sometimes you need a little bit of humor to kind of get you out of the reality of the matter.
No es fácil estar entre las cuatro paredes, all day long. So.
Entre las cuatro paredes. So we wanted to do, we kind of wanted to
lighten the mood.
Record something that was, in reality to what everybody's going through right now. So, maybe our next episode will be in Skype-wise. Maybe it's going to have to be in Skype-wise because we're not going to be able to leave our homes. But if we are, it'll probably be the regular format. But thank you, everybody, for always listening and being such a good audience. So
absolutely. And now we're going to kind of toss it over to the rest of the episode where we co-hosted with Cubano Chris from Instagram. Super, super groovy guy. Honestly...
Cubano Chris is one of the most intelligent people I've come across in a long time.
So articulate. He's definitely not, although he's 24, he is definitely not one of the spring breakers we were just talking about.
No. When I after we were chatting with him and he told us he was 24, I'm like, okay, there is hope.
Yes.
I hate to sound old because I never want to be that person that is like, I'm older than you, and
yeah,
those damn whippersnappers. I never want to be that person, even when I'm older.
Pero a veces se merece decirlo.
But it's like, okay, Yes. So yeah. So he was awesome. He was great. So I guess this is our back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Yes, already in progress.
Already in progress.
So today we have a special guest.
Yes, a co-host.
He's gonna be co-hosting with us. So you guys are gonna be listening to him and us for about the next hour while you listen, laugh, and learn in your hibernation.
Yes.
What is it? Social distancing.
Your what is it?
Homeschooling.
Self quarantine. I don't even know anymore.
I don't even know.
Mira que están en la casa.
So we're glad that Cubano Chris is here.
Yes, straight from Instagram in New York.
So for the next hour, we are going to have Cubano Chris.
Yes.
Who is very well known in Instagram. And
yes, he's straight from Instagram. So it's Chris Vasquez. He's a content creator. He does a lot of work on behalf of Cuba. His handle is @Cubano Chris on Instagram. He does, I think, tours and in New York. I mean, Well, first of all, welcome.
And
welcome to the
he
show.
has a great voice.
He has a great voice, so
you know,
we've pretty much invited him on here so you would have something else better than us to listen to.
So,
for during
Chris,
this quarantine.
welcome to Pero Let Me Tell You, and thank you for being our
Thank you
co-host
so
this
much,
week.
man.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here, and I've never been complimented on my voice this much, so hopefully I live up to it.
Well, you are on a podcast,
Yes.
so tell us a little bit about you, your background, and what it is that you're passionate about, so our listeners could know.
Yeah, so if it's cool with you guys, I'll give you my Cuban American origin story.
Well, I love comic books, and we're both Cuban, so yes, that works.
Awesome, perfect. Yeah, I always like that first issue comic book.
Exactly,
to get to
of
know
course.
someone. So I am a third generation Cuban American, and even that is a little tricky because it depends on who you ask, right? I mean, you guys might think of it as second generation.
Yeah.
Because right, so it's my grandparents came from Cuba, all four of them in the early '60s.
Mm-hmm.
They naturalized and became American citizen, best day of their lives. So I can't take that away from them. So I say that they're the first generation, and my parents, first generation born in the States.
Okay.
Yeah, so first generation born, but second generation Cuban American by that other definition. So,
So
by
both your
naturalization,
parents were born here.
both my parents were born here,
Oh,
and they've
okay.
never been to Cuba. I've actually been to Cuba 3 times.
Oh, wow.
I'll get to that. So through naturalization, I'm third gen, and through birth, I'm second. So it's always like tricky for people. But like I said, both my parents born here, and I grew up in Hialeah, Florida, where you guys have both spent some time. So growing up, I never really thought of my cultural identity because everyone was the same thing.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little before the episode. So it was growing up Cuban, but I didn't realize it until I went to high school in the next county over, Broward, which is like, if you're from Dade, when do you go to Broward?
Well, it's a foreign world, really.
Yeah.
Really. I had been there.
Unless you were
once,
going to the Rapids.
or Wannado City,
Right.
which is literally why I
Wannado
went
City,
there
right.
once before.
Well, we were a little too old for Wannado City, but yeah.
Wannado City was right in my sweet spot. So, so then it was like, oh, I'm different. I'm these quote unquote like white kids, Toyota Titans trucks, camo sweaters, country music. I'm like, oh, I'm that Cuban kid from Hialeah. I'm a little different. And then I go to University of Florida, like 5 hours
Whoa.
north, and that's a different world. And then the epitome of that was my move to New York in 2017. So my whole life it's like I'm Cuban, and then to go bring it full circle, I go to Havana for the first time, and it's like, holy shit, I'm American. Total reverse culture shock.
Interesting.
I'm so glad you spoke about that, because I think that affects people in different ways, and that's something that I have always struggled with since I was a child. I don't think you have struggled with it.
What?
But being like from two different cultures, like I've actually struggled with it because I feel that like it's hard to belong in one specific place, and I had a very similar experience to you. It's kind of a joke now among our listeners. I'm always referencing that I went to law school up in Michigan. It comes up, and every episode will be like, when I was in Michigan, and I was there only 3 years. But I remember that when I was in Michigan, I felt so different, and I had to explain my Cubanity, as Martha Darby would say. I felt I was constantly explaining my Cubanity to people because, first of all, a lot of people from up north don't really know about Cuba or specifics about Cuba. But I felt I was constantly giving people history lessons, and I'm like why? Like, I don't understand.
Like, I didn't come from another planet.
Yeah, I'm not an alien. So I
Right, yeah, and it's that universal struggle. On the one hand, I feel like identity is so important for people, kind of trying to root yourself in something, almost as a defense mechanism or coping mechanism. So that search for identity is everything, and so, I'm now comfortable in my skin as a Cuban American and discovering what that means. And my personal mission is to use, as you mentioned, Cubanity, or I use Cubanidad in Spanish, which the beauty of it is that you can't really
Either
define
way,
it to
Martha
people.
Darby's trademarked both of them. Just saying.
Oh,
She did?
Just
She
saying.
did?
Well, I'm saying she did. Whether she did or she didn't, but
Yeah, well, Cubanidad actually goes way back. There's been like amazing writings from Cuba on it, and yeah, Martha's great. I follow my big fat Cuban family, so whoever
she's
can bring
amazing.
that.
We've met her a couple of times already.
she's our tia. She's our West
she
Coast
feels
tia.
like family.
That's
Like
awesome.
she was the type of person that we had interviewed her in our first season, and we immediately hit
Loved
it off
her.
with her. And then when we went to LA last year, we met up with her, and I swear to you, it was like meeting up with an old friend. You know.
And I think that's part of Cubanidad, is that it's that cultural essence that you can't really define, but it's that calorcito de, alguien
the
que
perfect
cubano.
word.
It's calorcito,
That's a
exactly.
perfect
you
word.
hear
Ese
someone speaking
calorcito,
in your
it's-
acento, and you're like, coño.
Yeah,
Somos familia.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, you live in New York now.
Right.
You're up there, and I lived there for a couple of years. And it was that thing where it's just like when you hear that Cuban accent,
Yeah.
automatically you're just like, never met you, don't know who you are, could be a serial killer, but let's go have a cafecito.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like it just
you know who that happened to me with? Again, for people who listen to our podcast, it's a repeated story. So one of my favorite shows is Suits, the show, the attorney show. Do you know Gina Torres?
I don't.
Okay, so Gina Torres, prior to being on this show Suits, which again it's about like attorneys and New York law firm, she was really big in the sci-fi world. Yeah. She's like an icon in the sci-fi world. Yeah. But I'm not into sci-fi, so I didn't know who she was. And she's Afro-Latina. But on the show, she's like this powerful like a New York City attorney. They don't really talk about her background, but you assume she's just, African American, And there's an episode in like the third or fourth season where they're talking about like ordering food, and she's like, "Oh, did you order ropa?" She goes, "They're talking about ordering food." She's like, "Why don't we get ropa vieja from that Cuban restaurant?" And I'm like, pause. I'm like, the way that woman said ropa vieja,
She's Cuban.
I was like, that wasn't
minimum Puerto Rican.
I was like,
minimum.
I was like, no. And I looked her up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's Cuban.
Wow. That is
like
funny. You
ropa
can
vieja.
always tell. You can always tell. That is funny, man.
Yeah. So actually, I'm glad that you brought up, your generation, because something we've again talked about here is that there's a lot of, I don't want to name any particular group, but there's a lot of people that are Hispanic, Latino, whatever, that they very quickly assimilate to the U.S., which obviously there's pros to assimilating to the U.S., obviously, but that we feel that like so quickly lose their culture and don't either
I think historically
don't speak the language. But I find that a lot of Cubans, whether it's second, third generation and beyond, really keep that essence of Cubanity again. Like, look at you, do you speak Spanish?
I do.
Yeah.
It was my first language, actually.
There you go. You're third generation and you speak Spanish. What would you say that is? That,
like, for example, my grandparents, they viewed the move to Miami from Havana as temporary. Cuando todo eso se acaba, when that blows over, we'll go back. They weren't trying to be like, okay, we're American now, and let's figure out what we got to do here to be American. But my parents, they were that Que Pasa USA generation, where they're growing up in Miami in the 80s. They're both class of 84 in high school. So in the house, it's 1950 Savannah, and they're living in Cuba. And in school, it's Miami in the 80s. And you got the 80s hair and the music, drugs, what have you.
Lots of cocaine. It was the 80s.
Yeah. And so they were caught between two worlds. But me, growing up in Hialeah, when I grew up, I'm 24, by the way, if you guys don't know, it was, everybody around me was the same. We had chickens in the backyard, and that was just how it was.
That's normal.
Yeah.
I didn't have no dogs growing up. I had chickens.
You still have chickens at your
still have
parents' house.
chickens in my parents' house.
I feel like we've referenced Martha more on this episode than when she's actually been on the show. She mentioned when she was here, visiting, this whole phenomenon of like retroculturation, which I don't know if you're familiar with that term. I'm familiar with it from a marketing perspective, which is to say that kind of what you were seeing, Darian, which is, before it was like, no, assimilate. And now it's, I would say your generation and younger, or even, a little older, but it's about re-embracing that culture that may have been lost. And so, while from a Cuban perspective, I don't think that ever happened necessarily. I mean, obviously, as generations continue, you're going to have that diminishing impact just by virtue of where you're at. But a lot of Hispanics are now really turning back to the culture of their grandparents or great grandparents, etc., and sort of saying like, no, this is who I am and this is where I come from. So it's a really long-winded way of getting around to saying, is that something that obviously you grew up always embracing it, but that you're seeing around you and that kind of led you to lead this I don't want to say you're leading the charge, but kind of start doing what you do on Instagram with, educating people about, like the other day you posted something about, Cienfuegos and about policies and things like that, really using that social media platform to educate younger and even older generations. Like, let's be honest, people be stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I am part of this younger generation, but I grew up based, like, the mentality that was imparted onto me was that of the old generation, because it's not like my parents had come in the 80s from Cuba and something like it was the old guard and descendants of the old guard. So that's why I say my parents have never been to Cuba. I've been to Cuba 3 times strictly for humanitarian work. And so, yeah, like for example, to me, Camilo Cienfuegos, if all I knew about him was, oh, he had something to do with the revolution, I think evil, communist, evil, don't even mention it. But then when you read between the lines and you dig deeper and you learn a little bit more, oh, wait, this guy thought differently. Oh, wait, you know, he may have not been with the way that the trajectory was after the immediate 1959. What was happening before 1959? Did Cuba need this revolution? You know, was everybody involved bad? And obviously, no. There's shades of gray. There's nuance, and that's why my mission. Really, what hurts me is just the division between our community. Not only is it a very bifurcated community at a certain point in time, 1959, and so this is a different topic. But I look at Havana today, Havana 2019, as the modern iteration of Cuban. And Miami, I see as the modern version of Havana 1957. Totally different from Havana 2019.
That's fair.
In both places, they say I'm Cuban, and they mean something totally different. And that's why I think language is important. And I make a point to say I'm Cuban American. Although, yes, I'm Cuban, but we have to make that distinction because if you don't have context into both sides, which I think is very common, you won't realize how different they are. So I kind of lost my train of thought. I forgot where I was going with that.
No,
actually.
But yeah, because it's two people. It's one people that are really two people because people now in Cuba are people that were born into that system.
Right.
Yes.
And their
Culturally,
parents were born into that system.
Yes.
So that, you know, that system completely redefined, for worse, the
Cuban
culture,
experience.
the Cuban experience from culture to your everyday living. Whereas the old guard, as you would say, is based on a pre-revolution culture and identity that has been then now handed down to other
Exactly.
generations.
It just doesn't exist on the island.
And I remember that point I was on was really just about. I always come back to Cubanidad because what hurts me the most is the division between our community, not only within the Cuban American community, but also on a larger scale between Cubans and Cuban Americans. And I have this idea that I think todos somos cubanos. And so Cubanidad is really just focusing on the things that unite us and not the things that separate us. It's that essence of our culture. In the most extreme example, one of my recent posts was the people celebrating in Miami when Castro died.
I saw that.
And the people mourning his death and crying like actual, real, sincere tears in Havana when he died. Cubanidad is what can bring these people together. And that's really what I want to see. More...
That's
everything
like the
that has
goal
to do,
of what you're
yes,
doing.
and everything that has to do with Cuba is naturally political. But to be honest with you, I don't like the politics. I don't like that element of it.
Right,
you know,
right.
I just want the community. The community is so important to me. Empathy is the key. Mutual understanding, like that is you have to respect where people are coming from and honor everybody's experiences.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, my grandmother had the same experience. They showed up at her doorstep. They said, "Look, this house is ours now," and she's like, "Over my dead body, it's yours." And then she ended up coming over here, and it is trauma. It's trauma. And it's generations of trauma that need reconciliation, and Cubanidad can form the foundation for that reconciliation. So that's my thesis. I may be wrong.
So I want to now shift a little bit of the conversation, and this was actually one of the main reasons why I wanted you to co-host, and I wanted to have a conversation with you about because you're a millennial. You're a millennial, are you?
I think I technically fall in the next one.
He is doing everything in his power to like not get everybody to hate him by saying he's a millennial. He's
You know
like,
why? Because
Well, when did the millennials end? I was born in 95.
no, the
So
reason I
you
say
tell
that
me
is
what
because
I am.
we're technically not millennials, but we're in the cusp
We're like
of
that
almost being like we're like
Zillennial.
right in the cut of being millennials, but we don't identify with millennials whatsoever.
But I feel like you guys are millennials. How old are you guys?
Not, we will say it off air. Let's just say that we were born right when the cutoff
Let's just
happened.
say we're old
Right.
enough to remember
95.
the 95
when he was born.
and the 80s when your parents
Right. But anyway,
Got it.
So this a couple of weeks ago or whenever.
For the sake of the podcast, I'm a millennial.
Well, but even if you're, what's the next generation? Z?
Z would be the
Right.
next one.
But it proves my point even further. A couple of weeks ago, we had the whole Bernie Sanders thing saying that not all things were bad in Cuba, you know, the literacy program and all that. And I made it very vocal on the podcast how I felt about that. And I find just throughout time that in this day, 2020, there's still people, specifically to the Castro regime, there's still people who either completely like have no clue of what has gone on there, or in a way defend it? Because when I start hearing people say, well, yeah, life is tough there, but they have free health care and, free education. I'm like, stop. I think we can all agree, most of society, that somebody like Hitler was a murderer, was, Satan on earth, killed 6 million Jews. I think we could all say the same thing about Mussolini. We could say the same thing, Stalin, the Ceausescus in Romania, and we could go on and on different historical figures. Why do you think that here it is in 2020 that there are still people that don't know or don't understand that Fidel Castro belongs in that category, and that he is obviously a murderous dictator, and that he, did what he did to Cuba? Why do you think that, again, especially for the younger generation, this is still up for debate? Because nobody's debating whether Hitler was a good guy, right? But yet for Castro, we're still having this conversation.
Right. Should we put this on TikTok? Is basically what we're asking.
We're still having this conversation.
That's super interesting, because I actually haven't explored that too much, in the sense that you're right. He's a more controversial in the sense that the only thing people will say about Hitler that's anywhere near good is to say the guy was super smart to be able to manipulate an entire country. But there's no doubt in anybody's mind that he was an evil guy. But there's some people that are really apologists for the regime. Otherwise, you'd think, oh, this is a decent, smart guy. How could he think this?
For the Castro regime.
For the Castro regime, exactly. Yeah. So I think history is written by the winners. And if you look, you have a system that's persisted in Cuba for 60 years. He didn't fall. He died peacefully in his bed of old age. So they've been writing their own underdog story throughout these 60 years. And I think that and painting the U.S. as the big bad aggressor, when this is a different topic. I don't think our restrictive policies are doing Cuba any favor, but they're where they are because of a product of the failures of their own system. And Castro was an evil guy. I mean, like, people, I feel like this is not a widely known thing, but, the concentration camps basically that existed in Campo in Cuba. Right. And in the early days of the revolution, I mean, Castro was portrayed as almost like a Christ figure. There were reports that he was dead, and then, oh no, that there's a legend, he's alive in the mountains. And so kind of like this guy couldn't be beat, and that he was on this noble quest to free Cuba not only from its own dictatorship but from the grasp of the United States. And these narratives are powerful, and I think that they've persisted because the regime has not ended. Yeah,
that's fair.
I've especially in this day and age, well, for a while now, that information is so easily to obtain. I've just always had a hard time really grasping it, and I've tried to see this from an unbiased position. Why there's so many people who just don't know, like either they don't know or still defend him.
Yeah, but what have I always told you? The more information we have, the dumber people get, because now they don't actually.
Yeah, but
they don't actually have
like,
to retain anything.
For example, when this whole Bernie Sanders, I posted something on Instagram and on our page, and I purposely hashtag Bernie Sanders because I knew that was going to get the attention of the Bernie Bros.
Right,
and it worked. And it just people going in there defending, like, literacy, education, the healthcare, people live better. Cuba was a dictatorship before. Batista was a dictator.
Do you get mad? Is your reaction to get mad at that, or do you look at it as maybe this person has no context?
I do get mad, and I'm going to tell you why. Yeah. Because I get mad because I strive in being an informed person. I either try to learn about other things that obviously I don't know about, or at the minimum, if I don't know about it, I'm not going to give like a concrete opinion on it.
That's how I am. If I don't know about, I will talk to you about Cuba, and I will talk to you almost about nothing else because I don't know other things that well. I kind of stay in my lane of what I know. But you gotta
co-host.
You got to think people.
I don't know. Is he gonna know about other topics?
I'll throw some stuff in there, but I'll really ask. Like, I asked you that question because I'm like, my natural reaction may be to get mad, but when I think, this person is citing facts that on paper they sound good, and so if they genuinely don't have that context, maybe the onus is on them for not going and informing themselves properly. But if you come at it with empathy, I feel like it's easier to just not get pissed.
But I think the problem with that is many times, and actually in recent years, again, people have more information at their fingertips, and it doesn't seem that way because you come back at them with something like either an accurate representation or a fact or a statistic or whatever, or a personal anecdote, you know what I mean, where it's just like, listen, this happened
I lived
to
through
me,
it, you know?
blah blah,
Right.
and they'll come back and be like, oh well, just because it happened to you doesn't mean it's like, it's just one of those things where it's just like, okay, you know what, entonces ya tú lo que no quieres aprender. You know what I mean? You are not open to that other side either.
That's a pet peeve of mine. If you're not open to, I want to change my mind on everything. If I get new data, so I that's definitely a pet peeve of mine for sure.
People either again are willfully ignorant on it or just don't care. They just
that was my angle with the Camilo Cienfuegos. I was like, let's make Camilo famous because he's a figure that people can get behind, and he's with the revolution. So it's a way to bring the old guard in too. But yeah, when somebody tells you, look, the limited narrative on Che, here's why I'm wearing this shirt, because fight the power. You don't think like, oh, this guy's a terrible person. You just think, pobre. He doesn't know what he's wearing. Mm-hmm. And then, so that's kind of how I've come to look at it.
Yeah, but we've said this several times where it's just like, if you're going to wear something that blatantly,
then you should know what it's about.
Know what it
is.
is.
I completely agree.
That's like, I mean, I'm not going to, this happened to me at Cirque du Soleil a couple months back where there was a guy there, wearing some high-end, probably like a Fendi shirt or whatever, and it had Karl Lagerfeld on it. And I told him, I'm like, oh, I really like your shirt. That's Karl Lagerfeld, right? And he looked at me. He's like, who is that? What is that? I'm like, I know that shirt wasn't cheap because that was a Fendi shirt.
Right.
And you don't know who that, you don't know what it is you're wearing. Like, that's the bigger crux of the problem I have with that is like, coño, me favor.
Yeah. Something comforting for you guys, and this goes back to the whole thing of Fidel, is that sometimes the truth always comes to light, but sometimes it may take a while. I feel like we only recently started being like, why are we celebrating Columbus Day? That guy just slaughtered Indians, or Native Americans. And there's people out there that hate Martin Luther King. And you think, how do you hate Martin Luther King?
Racist.
No, it's because it's known that he cheated on his wife. And that's what's very important to these people.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so, he
did
all.
But if I were to put that on a scale,
I know,
infidelity and
people have their
all
values.
The other things he did.
It's empathy. People have their values.
If she could get over it.
I mean, is the Me Too movement gonna go after Martin Luther King?
No, it's not Me Too. It's not Me Too. But that's what they value, And to put a bow on the Bernie thing, because I think you wanted to ask me about it, because I wrote about it. But I basically said, look, he has a sort of a history where he's conflicted. He's contradicted himself a number of times on whether he thinks Fidel Castro was great or not, or condemns authoritarianism, whatever he said. And so you can kind of play that either way, but it's really a moot point because you're talking about someone's personal opinion on another person. So you can't really say that. What you can do is assess objectively the merits of the Cuban Revolution, which are inherently flawed. And then that's what I wrote about, and that's what you're saying people should be educated on, which is like, look, literacy rates in Cuba before the revolution, 80% literate. And that was number 4 in Latin America, on par with Chile and Costa Rica. And now all 3 of these countries have nearly 100% literacy, but Chile economically is one of the most successful countries in Latin America. So at what cost, and not to mention obviously the human rights abuses, which you can't just put it in a box, which I think is what Bernie tried to do. And it's like, no, look, it's all part of a comprehensive story that we're telling here.
Wouldn't do it with anybody else. That's
right.
to Darian's point.
Exactly.
You wouldn't be like, Saddam Hussein, fine, slaughtered people, but
no, but that's like,
but they all had oil.
I said that here on the episode we talked about it. I said, well, it's not like people nowadays say, well, Hitler and the Nazis invented the Autobahn, right, which in essence it's a highway system.
Tremendo artista.
So Hitler wasn't all bad. I mean, I feel that when you're talking about people of that caliber, you can't celebrate them.
Right.
I mean, you can maybe mention, yes, this did happen while they were in power.
But then even look at what the things that they're mentioning that did happen with the improvement in literacy. Like that is so that's what I'm saying. Like,
because even that is flawed.
Exactly.
Not according to somebody who commented on our post.
And what I really like took extra offense, and now I took offense as a Cuban. I was like, are you saying that Cuba was una isla de analfabeto before like Castro came to power? That, you know, everybody was like couldn't read and write? I mean, because when he said that, oh, you know, he taught Cubans how to read and write, it's like, no, he didn't. Like,
Right.
Cubans knew how to read and write before that, and Havana was like a huge cosmopolitan city, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It was the Paris of the Western Hemisphere. Yeah.
yeah. So
Or, sorry, you know what I mean. Paris of Latin America.
yeah, it's just I feel that, I mean, maybe you're right as you say that like history is becoming more woke. Maybe his stock will go down. Like,
Well, sure as hell can't go up.
because
Shit.
I feel that, you know, we again 61 years after the revolution,
About 61, yeah.
and we're still having this conversation on how some people defend the guy.
Well, talking about stocks, what about that little virus that's going around right now?
As
May
I
have
said,
heard of it.
episode 1 or 2, our second coronavirus episode. So how are our listeners in hibernation?
How in hibernation?
Yeah, no, that's what I want to call it,
Quarantena.
hibernation.
Quarantena.
That
Quarantena,
hibernation.
which is actually also the new name that is going to be going around in Hialeah.
Quarantine.
Quarantena.
La cuarentena.
Quarantenasis.
Has everybody eaten their snacks?
Well, okay, so you managed to be down here. 'Cause
I
you're
did.
in New York right now.
I'm based out of New York,
and
yeah.
You're based out of New York, and you happen to be down here. So, how were you experiencing it at all before you came down here up in New York? Like, was there any like beginnings of
A little bit,
mania?
yeah.
I don't know what to call it.
As I put sanitizer on my hands.
Yes.
I think the nature of New York is just it kind of lends itself to that, right? You have a lot of people in close quarters. I guess there were a little bit less people out in the streets, but everything was sort of running according to plan. There were some rumors that they were going to shut down the subway, and that would be a nightmare for people.
Well, the L train hasn't run for 4 years anyway.
Yeah, that thing is still not
mean,
running appropriately.
It never will.
Is the subway still running though?
Yeah.
It is. They didn't do that. I mean, that would be a nightmare. But there are rumors again. Well, apparently Cuomo, the governor, is not a fan of it, but de Blasio, the mayor, wants to do a shelter-in-place order, which basically means don't leave your house unless it's absolutely essential.
Yeah, no, I have friends who still live up there, and I was talking to them just this week, and one of them's a teacher, so he's staying home. And also, let's take a moment to give a massive thank you to all the teachers, because all I'm hearing from my friends who have kids is, how the hell do teachers do this day in day out? Mm-hmm. Because all parents are like, now they're homeschooling, and
Right.
I think they're all gonna start doing una colecta, so that teachers now make $1 billion a year just based on
should.
this, because it's in craziness.
Yeah.
But my friend was jumping on the subway. His husband works in the city, and he's like, it was eerie because it was just like 20 people, whereas before it was like 70 people. I mean, we're talking rush hour time, like in the morning, and he's just like, and everybody's just like, social distancing, you're 6 feet apart, which obviously the subway, it's like sometimes you just actually, if you walk into a train and there is quote unquote social distancing, you don't get in that train, because that just means that's a really smelly homeless person.
Yes. No, la gente se te tiran arriba on the trains.
Yeah, so I mean, it's crazy.
So why the toilet paper? That's something we're still trying to figure out. Why are people like obsessed with toilet
What
paper?
I've heard is it's a comfort thing. But
It's a comfort thing?
It's a comfort thing. If I have toilet paper, I'm good. I think it's because, you might have to be quarantined for a while, and at least
I will say
okay,
I am down to one roll, and I am freaking out.
Okay, I think coming from a place that, getting a hurricane here is like, I don't know, like Tuesday, it's like, oh, it's a hurricane coming. So I guess we're more used
pero
to...
la gente, people freak out here.
No, people
too.
freak out here. No, people, that's something that we laugh about too. But what I was saying is that even when hurricanes come here, that they could blow away Publix or whatever, people don't go crazy over toilet paper. No. Like, what I want to know is, like, with this specific scare, why toilet paper? It's not like coronavirus gives you the run. This is like,
I think it's like a prophecy that sort of reinforces itself. Like, the more people are saying toilet paper, then it's just like a scarcity thing where people are like, oh man, I don't
Clearly,
need toilet paper,
need
but
it.
I'm gonna get some toilet paper.
Yeah. It's a snowball effect.
Yeah. Or you could wind up being like that douche who was just covered in the New York Times. Did you see that? That he had hoarded like 17,000
and Amazon stopped him
on Amazon. Yeah.
Oh,
did you see
Jesus.
this?
No, I didn't.
So
but...
he actually has an Amazon store. So I mean, historically, what he does is, when he sees, it's all about context, right? When he sees that there's an item that's like the hot new item, what he will do is, like, let's say way back when, Tickle Me Elmo, that type of thing. He'd go out to the store, he'd buy them, and then he'd resell them on his Amazon store.
Right.
With a markup. But again, up until now, it's basically been like items that are hot items, right? Well, guess what the hot item is now? Purell.
Yeah.
So he went on and he bought a bunch of Purell and antibacterials and things like that.
17,000 bottles.
17,000 bottles.
And he was selling them for what, $75?
Ridiculous amounts.
That's crazy.
So Amazon, and then they featured him in the New York Times, which I still don't understand why.
In a positive way?
Hell no.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the guy started getting, which again just shows why we can't have los dos extremos, right? He started getting death threats, and he started, like just that whole extreme of like, I'm going to kill you for your Purell. And so now he's actually being investigated by where he lives. I think he's in Connecticut. He's being investigated for price gouging. But what he did do is he turned around and he started donating all this stuff now to like local churches and charities and things like that, because
maybe the pressure just got to him.
But not just that. What are you going to do? First of all, okay, yeah, let's say even if you're selling it, eventually, like Amazon right now, Amazon is only sending out priority items like medicine and groceries through Amazon Direct. Everybody else has been deprioritized. So guess what? Even somebody's willing to pay $1,000 for that bottle of Purell, it's not going out.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
You're stuck.
So he messed up the whole supply chain by doing that, basically.
I mean, he really did. And again, it's just like, coño, caballero, like in this type of bullshit, you know what? Stop being greedy.
A lot of
don't leverage other people's pain.
From what I heard, a lot of supermarkets or stores are now putting a limit on certain essentials that you could only buy like 3 per person.
That's what they want. They say buy what you need and no more.
So
meanwhile, my mom at la tienda like 2 20-pound bags of rice in my house. I'm like, Mom,
because we're Cuban, you need rice. Listen, it has to happen. But Mira Sedanos just today announced that they're doing the early morning hour. That I think it's from like 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., which is a supermarket down here in South Florida, just for the elderly.
That's awesome.
So they're, people are really, and I feel that was a social media thing that people just really started saying like, "Hey guys, we should do this for the elderly."
Is like really big on social media. Do we feel this is hyped up? Do we feel this is legit? Like, are we in the right place? Are we handling this correctly? Like, what do we really think about this whole coronavirus thing? Like, because there's still people who think it's like we're overreacting.
There's a church. There's that church that hosted Trump out here in Kendall that they're like, oh, God wants us to still congregate. This is all, falsities and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you know what? Y'all can get together. I'll lock the door behind you and have at it.
Yeah.
I think there's so much that we don't know. The way that it spreads exponentially. It's already mutated once, so that's a factor. So there's just so many unknowns, and I think we're right to take precautions because this is not a human virus that we have any natural immunity to. This came from some animal that ate another animal that somebody then bought and ate in Wuhan, and that's how it started. And so culturally, we don't have the capability to handle this the way China did, which is they basically said no. They leveraged their authoritarian system. That wouldn't really fly here. But we are trying to take these precautions, and even just look at New York, the outbreak. It's already up to 1,000 cases in the city.
I think a lot of people may not be taking it seriously because of the mortality rate.
Right.
It does not have a high mortality rate, thank God.
So far.
Well, but I mean, for a pandemic of its size, that it's already pretty much touched every corner of the earth, it doesn't have a high mortality rate. Because even in China or in Europe, I mean, the numbers are skyrocketing.
But what was the mortality of H1N1?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Well, I feel like it was, I could be wrong too, but I thought it was even less. I think this one has about between a 3 and a 4% mortality rate. But you think with all the struggle that they're having testing people, there are so many unconfirmed cases that the mortality rate is probably that much lower.
So it infected nearly 61 million people in the U.S. alone, and it had 12,469 deaths.
H1N1?
Yeah.
So this is high, a very high mortality rate compared to that.
Right, but again, this is with hindsight.
Right.
That's another thing is, you have to look at it. You can't compare the numbers of something once it's been, corralled or contained versus when something is just starting. Because if you look at the numbers, when something is going from 0 to 60, it's always going to be like ridiculously high too.
Because I mean, I remember obviously when that happened, when the swine flu happened, SARS, remember SARS?
Ebola.
Well, but Ebola was contained to Africa.
Ebola came and went super quick.
Yeah, in Africa. And it wiped out a lot of people because that is, I don't know what the mortality rate was, but it was very high. I mean, if you got that, the chances of you making it...
You were done.
You were done. And I think that may be one of the reasons why a lot of people aren't taking it seriously. They just think it's the flu, you got a bad cough, and stay home, don't go out, and you'll be fine.
But it really takes a toll on your lungs, and if you're immune deficient or anything like that, then if you're compromised in your immune system, then it could be
What
really
actually
fatal for you.
scares me the most, well, there's two things that scare me. There's an economic impact, which we could talk in a minute. But in terms of the actual illness, what scares me the most, which is what actually scares a lot of people, is the fact that, there's so many people that are asymptomatic, and those are the people. I mean, we could have it for all we know, although we're asymptomatic. We don't show any symptoms at this moment, and we could give it to somebody else.
I see what you're saying.
So that's like, I think that's the worrisome part, because from what I read, it could be incubated for up to 14 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's not like, you came into contact with it yesterday and 24 hours later you.
Well, they also don't still know exactly how long it can live on surfaces either. So that's another thing. It's funny, I was talking to my father today, and I was just like, no, I felt like I was the parent. I was like, no vayan a salir sin necesidad. Stay home. No vayan. I mean, my parents are in their 60s. Yeah. So, and my dad, I mean, they're healthy. My parents go to the gym. They do, my dad does taekwondo. But it's one of those things where he's just like, no, but I'm going to go out for ice cream. I'm like, just Uber Eats it. Like, I'll send it to you. Like, and it's not even so much because of my parents. I mean, if, God forbid, they get it, I have a feeling they'll be okay in the long run. But it's then my grandmother.
Right.
Because my grandmother lives, again, she's almost hermetically sealed in her house. Like, she never leaves. It's her y la señora que la cuida. But my mother goes and does everything for her.
The same situation.
So it's one of those things where it's like, if my mother, again, it's asymptomatic. What if my mother gets it and, un catarrito and it's no big deal. Yeah. But she goes, to take something as innocent as the groceries, to my grandmother. And now we've got a situation.
Yeah, I'm not even visiting my abuela when I'm down here, just in case.
I visited her today from the car. She was at the doorway, and I was at the car, and I'm like, Mima!
As long as you were more than 6 feet away, you're good.
I was like 30 feet away.
But that's a problem for us Cubans.
I know.
We can't do besitos
and nothing. You can't even share a cafe.
Where are you guys' families from?
Well, my family is from what my mom says the shithole of Earth, which is a small town, population 5,000, Calo Roja, but it was in La Provincia de Matanza.
Got it.
And it wasn't too far from Matanza, the capital, the city.
Right.
And they were, as my mom would say, the only reason why we didn't kill ourselves were because they were, I think, like a half-hour drive to Wannado.
Right.
So the beach was very close.
You see, not everybody had this luxurious old life in Cuba, but they love it.
No, not at all. Not at all. Because a lot of, and this happens all the time, a lot of people, like there's this lady that works with me that she jokes around that she says, do you notice that everybody from Cuba is from Havana? She's like, in Havana, they must have a lot of really high skyscrapers.
Bueno, pero don't you know the thing? Cuando la gente dice, yo soy de La Habana, the response is, ¿de qué piso?
Right. Because everybody's from Havana. She's like, I'm not from Havana. I'm from Oriente. And no, my parents are from a very small town that they were like, some houses had dirt floors.
Yeah.
Like they grew up with very, very modest, like very modest. I think my parents lived in a wooden house until like the 60s.
Encantado de la vida.
Yeah.
I don't know about Encantado de la vida if you hear his mother tell the stories, but yeah, they were good.
Bottom line, Twitter is unforgiving.
Twitter is just Twitter and Reddit. I don't know. I people go there porque le gusta fajar.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where they go.
Quieren meter con la gente, and that's what it is.
Gana joder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we were on, I guess we still are on Twitter.
We're still there.
I mean, it's just for, I guess, informational purposes. Here's our new episode.
Actually, you know why we're still on Twitter? We're on Twitter because I didn't want anybody to take our name.
Okay, well, that's a pretty good reason.
I was like, screw this. I think I even signed us up for Google Hangouts. I was like, screw it. Nobody's taking our name.
So how does a Miami boy from Miami Lakes High like New York? Like,
you've been up there now?
There's good days and there's bad days. This is my third year. The first year I was in Hoboken, across the river.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, Hoboken was nice.
I like Hoboken.
It was nice.
It's Jersey.
It's Jersey.
Jersey's not bad.
Yeah, there's that narrative out there, but I mean, I don't know. It was nice compared to New York. I mean, there's a very high price floor that you're gonna pay a lot, but it's how much bang you get for that buck. And in New York, it's a lot less than it is in Jersey.
Depends where you live. You know this. You saw my apartments in Queens.
Yeah, but you were in Queens.
But you were in Queens.
That's what I'm saying. I was in Queens. I was only a subway away.
Well,
So
I
is,
mean,
Hoboken.
so Hoboken. I mean, Hoboken is on the other side of where you
But
were.
it's not a
kind of.
borough.
Oh, okay,
It's not a borough.
Okay, Mr. New Yorkino.
Anyways, it's good and
Hoboken.
bad. I love nature. I love grass. I literally came back and I was so happy to see Miami grass.
You posted that the other
I
day.
posted that. And did you guys how did you feel about it?
Well, I mean, as somebody whose father has like a botanical garden in the backyard,
On Okeechobee?
no, aquí en la,
Oh no, my mind went to the plant nurseries.
well, no, that's where he gets them. Pero no, I mean, yeah, you miss it, but then my second apartment actually, I had a backyard
Yeah.
in New York, so I mean,
That's pretty awesome. The only
was-
thing
it was
Miami's
nice.
missing to me is like una montaña. Because if you want nature, you got the Everglades. If you want like a
Little
low key
Chico, you're in a
vibe, you go to
tropical
Key
park?
Biscayne. Yeah, okay. Well, tropical park has, or you go to a landfill, basically.
exactly.
So let me ask you this, because this is something I struggled with for a bit. Did you always appreciate Miami? Do you appreciate it now more that you're gone? Did you ever go like back and forth? Because I know I went through a phase, and I think a lot of people go through that phase, that I hated Miami. I was over Miami. I'm like, oh, I'm just sick of it. And now I'm like, Mr. Miami. Like, I'm Mr. 305.
Yeah, that's so common, but I gotta tell you, maybe it's the lens that I've looked at it. Maybe it's because I did not like New York. Like first winter, freezing my ass off. It was, and the whole concrete jungle. Like I like being outdoors, but I had always had that appreciation that the first time I left, number one, I didn't really get like the whole experience of like going out of Miami because I was in college. That's when I turned 21 and stuff, and then the college. Directo para New York, basically.
Where do you go to school?
University of Florida.
Oh,
and that's the thing. Like,
I read at
look,
Gainesville.
Even when I was at University of Florida, the Gators, I got so much shit from all my friends because I was like, no, hometown. I'm a Canes fan. Like,
Whoa, you were brave.
bro, I got prepaid and bright futures, so I'm not gonna to go to top 8 public university. I'm not gonna make a dumb decision. I'm gonna go there. So don't fault me for not going to
Of
UM.
course.
Pero, I was a hometown guy, so I was always like Canes fan, and so it didn't jive too well up there. But then even in New York too, it's like, no, I feel like everyone in New York is not from New York. Miami is like has like that feel, like it's like the culture. It's a because you guys get this, like you're too Cuban for the Americans, you're too American for the Cubans, but like Hialeah was that sweet spot where I just felt home. So I have to say I've always appreciated Miami, and maybe it's because I have looked at it from that lens of like screw New York that I've been like, no, there is opportunity in Miami, because that's what people say is like everybody and that there's no opportunity, but I'm like, no, it's changing.
It's
There's
funny
opportunity.
because people, and no offense to New York, I actually love New York. I grew up going to New York because we had family in New York, so I'm very familiar with New York, and I love New York. But people have un peo atravesado in New York that it's like, oh my God, I want to go move to New York. And I'm like, do you know what that really means?
Yeah.
You used to have it. You used to have it. I'm like,
I love New York.
I know you do love New York,
I would
but
go back
Well, look, I'm there for love, because you might be asking yourself, why are you even there?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, wait, it doesn't sound like he's very happy. I don't know, like.
Well, I make the best of everything, and I'm good now. I'm doing my thing. Pero yeah, I've been with my girlfriend for a very long time, and no, she was like, after you graduate college, like, yeah, we'll move in together, but I don't want to go home.
Is she from New York or?
No, she's from Weston here. I met her in high school.
Oh,
yeah. So
okay.
she came down for high school. I went up, and then we've been dating for like 9 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
What industry does she work in?
She's a nurse, so she is fighting the coronavirus right now on her floor. So shout out to teachers, but also nurses.
Absolutely,
yeah.
all healthcare professionals. Yeah.
Yes. So then she's like, look, like we'll settle. For me, it's very important to, like, when I have kids, I crié with my abuelos, so I want my kids to be very close with my parents. So she's like, yeah, we'll settle down in Miami, but I want to spend my 20s living in different places. Now
Okay, that's a good compromise.
She's already wanting to leave and go to California next, so we have to see. But I was like, okay, I'll give you 20 through 30 if I get 30 through 100. That's a great deal for me.
no,
That works out.
No, that's good. And listen, you do live somewhere else. You do get a different
experiences.
perspective, because
And I don't regret it, of course.
yeah,
Like,
it's a different perspective. But again, to New York, and New York is the greatest city in the world. I'm not knocking New York. I'm a huge New York Yankees fan. But like New York, it's like super expensive. If you want like a decent apartment, you either have to make a lot of money or you have to have 4 or 5 roommates. And to me, the idea of a roommate is a 4-on-1. That's an American thing that you have roommates. I'm like, Cubans don't have roommates.
Well, why do you think I lived in Queens?
Or but to all due respect, when people think of living in New York, they think of living in Manhattan, not Queens.
No, of course. But listen, I had all the perks of New York and none of the downside.
Listen, and I think your second apartment in Queens was like great. That was bigger than an apartment here, you know. But I think that's not also always. You also went at a different stage in your life and all that. So you already went kind of established.
That's true. I mean, I went in my 30s and I was already at a certain level in my career,
right?
Where, you know, again, it's not like I was making, you know, millions.
What were you doing back then?
So I work in marketing.
Okay.
So I was, again, there was just a lot of perks. I worked for the agency, on the agency side, ad agencies. And so it was like, you know, I was making decent money.
And you made a calculated move. You had a job.
Right. I went up there with a job. I was making decent money. And on top of that, because of the nature of my industry, there was a lot of perks.
So you were going into the city, though, from
Oh, yeah,
Queens.
yeah. But also, like, literally, the subway that I would take in would drop me off, like, in my office.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, I didn't plan that, by the way. That was just totally happenstance.
Yeah.
But, like, again, I was able to go to parties and premieres and da-da-da-da. So I had a very atypical opportunity in life just by virtue of what I do.
What agency?
I first worked for, I can't remember right now, for IPG and then for Zenith Optimedia.
And you're still doing the same thing? But down here?
So I'm working now. I'm still in marketing, but I'm on the client side now.
Got it.
So yeah, Miami. I like Miami.
I think we all love Miami.
I love. Look, my favorite American city is Chicago. I absolutely love.
I've never been.
Oh my gosh, Chicago is, and again, I'm not knocking New York. I love New York. Is like a classier, cleaner version of New York.
I always say it's like if New York and Miami had a baby.
Yeah,
because you get the downtown and the hustle and bustle of a New York. But the suburbs are like right there.
Yeah, the suburbs are right there, and you know there's houses with grass, and
but you freeze.
That is true. That is true. And also because it's on Lake Michigan, you get that kind of ocean feel that you would hear. Right. But it's I absolutely love Chicago. But it's true what you said, and this is like your Cuban Hispanic part of you. I knew that eventually one day I was gonna have kids, and it's like I don't want my kids to grow up like Americano, I see grandma and grandpa twice a year. We're going to grandma's house. It's like
what are you summer?
No, we're gonna no. It's like no. I want my parents.
What do you
involved.
mean? What summer?
My house. I want my parents involved in my kids' life, so I could fight with them and tell them they're wrong and get meddled in all my business with my kid, and that's how it is, and
that's what I love about Cuban society is la familia es todo. It's at the center. It's like that nucleus, and so that's really, really important for me.
That's something that we try to talk about that in the podcast a lot about cultures. That is, I think, the biggest difference between American culture and Cuban and Hispanic. Most Hispanics are kind of like that. It is the role of the family.
It's the family, yeah.
It's the role of the family, because I've said this to a lot of people. I'm like, in Miami, a lot of people don't move away. They move away and they come back, but they eventually settle here because of their parents, to be near their parents. And I think that's a very specific thing. Like, I couldn't imagine seeing my family a handful of times a year.
Yeah. And my mom would say, "Eso cosa del americano."
It's a cosa americano. That's an American thing. Yeah. It's like, what? It's like, I expect my parents to be meddling in all my shit.
We're like the Godfather in Cuban society. Yes.
But that's like a concept. I always reference. Have you seen the movie Fools Rush In?
I have not.
Hayek and
no.
And Matthew Perry. So Matthew Perry's your typical wasp, white guy, and Salma Hayek is Mexican, and of course her family's all up in her Kool-Aid, and it is how it is. And there's a scene, and they have a problem with that. Like, Matthew Perry's character has like a problem with that, and there's a scene that she tells him, because when he has to talk to his parents, he's like, oh, I'll have to deal with my parents, and there's a scene that she's like, my parents are not something that I deal with. My parents are my family. Yeah. They're part of me. They're, this is like a package. They are with me in the good times and the bad times, whatever. She goes on and off. And I thought that very effectively, put that. that our families aren't something that we deal with on Thanksgiving, and
Right.
it's an everyday thing. It's part of everything that we do. I think that's like a really big difference.
And they amenazan with the importance of family. Like, ese es tu hermano.
Yeah.
Ese es tu familia. Ese es tu sangre.
Yes.
Ese es tu hermano.
Yes.
El día de mañana, eso es lo único que tú vas a tener.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Like my father, like, if I go a certain amount of time without talking to my brother, for whatever reason, tú has llamado a tu hermano.
Llama a tu hermano.
Llama a tu hermano, porque tú no vas a casar de tu hermano. I'm like, my brother's right there, But then it's true. Then I think about, like, I haven't seen my brother in a month. Why haven't I seen my brother? It's like life gets in the way, and then you have to make that effort. But
Yeah, but that's why, like, literally, me and my sister. Not only do me and my sister text every day, but we have a group text with all of our cousins. And on my father's side, we're like 12 first cousins.
Wow.
So we literally every single day we all know what the hell's going on.
Is it the same kind of thing with your first cousins? Is it that close?
Yeah, we're very close. To the point where, I mean, not so much now because everybody's married and has kids and all that, but there was a time that we were growing up where it was like every weekend it would be like, en casa de mi tía, everybody se reunía, la otra tía, because we also all grew up like, if we were 2 miles away from each other, it was too far. So it was just that whole, like, nos criamos juntos, and we're all very close in age. So I think between, like, if you start at the top and you keep going down, I think between everybody, it's like maybe at the most you've got like a 2-year difference.
Yeah, that was exactly what it was for me on my mom's sister, her kids. So like those primo mano, we were super close. On my dad's side, it's a little far removed. I mean, it's still first cousins, but we don't. That's more of like a holiday kind of thing.
Yeah. No, that's on my father's side. On my mother's side, I don't have the one.
It's the way we treat our family in slumber parties, because we weren't allowed to go to slumber parties.
Yeah.
Like,
ellos pueden venir acá.
Pero tú, you go sleep in somebody else's house.
Aquí tú tienes tu casa.
Exactly. Or like, I love when like white friends of mine are like, oh, but you never went to your friend's house when the parents were out of town. I'm like, out of town? Cuban parents don't go out of town.
That's true. I think the only time that like we did that, I think, is like, y esto fue después de viejo. Like, I think we were in college when my parents, started going off to like vacation by themselves, and I was like, well, let's just have a barbecue at my house. Like, we were in our 20s?
Yeah.
O sea, it was when I used 20, to do that.
We were like in our mid to late 20s.
Por eso digo, it was like,
that was like the other day.
We were, bastante legal,
And that's the downside, I would say, is like not getting exposure, which is good that you leave and you live in another place and you come back and you keep the la cultura, but like then you can't always live so encerrado too, because then you never get that exposure.
Yeah,
that's true.
It's true, but you know what though, and maybe I see it differently now because I'm older and I'm also now a parent. What would our parents say? Oh, you're not going to stay alone in anybody's house because that's how things happen. How you do, like, try drugs and drink, and that's when you do it. And it's funny because when I hear all my white friends, when like the parents were out, we used to like get high and like drink, and I'm like, see, that's what my parents
that's what they meant.
talk about, and that's why I never did.
Your
that.
parents at least te leyeron la cartilla, because sometimes my parents would be porque no me da la gana, and that was it.
But in all of our defense, okay, nosotros éramos tremendo grupo de nerdo. That would not have happened.
Right, but what I'm saying is, but we were a group. We're still the same group of friends from high school.
6th, 7th grade.
We're a group of like 9 or 10 of us, and all of our parents have similar values. So none of us were really allowed to do that growing up when we were in middle school or even high school. But our parents had similar values. But the point was that none of us did none of that shit, to begin with, at that age.
Yeah.
Because, our parents
Pero sí, hello.
I never did anything, yeah.
The example of that is that one time we were in senior year of high school. We've known each other forever. We all went to a party, David's party.
Yes.
And David's parents were not at the house. Y eso empezó, like, it started off with, vamos a decir, 20 gente, and then it became 40, and then it became 60. Y empezó, like, tener, tú sabes, ese elemento. We all literally just looked at each other and we're just like, you know what, let's just leave.
Let's just leave.
Yeah.
Because we were not those people.
Yeah.
You had like la costumbre. No, my mom is so good. Like, she's always let me do everything. Like, siempre, claro, me lee la cartilla, whatever. But she's always been like, let me do everything. And so, like, anything I tell her, like, she'll never get mad at me. So I literally tell her everything. Mm-hmm. But like, she's very like no drugs. Like, it would kill her. And so I've never been high. I've never so much as smoked weed.
Yeah.
Just because, like,
I think I did my first drug at the age of like 27.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Me neither. Because I was like raised with that like fear, and then it comes to a point.
For me, it's not even fear. It's like she's so good. She lets me do everything. This is her one thing. If I'm not super interested in it, then like, why am I gonna?
But no, that's why. It's like I grew up with a fear about it, but then it came to a point that when you're old enough to do it, it's like, why do it? It's like I've been perfectly fine without it all this time. Yeah. So like, why am I gonna...
Next time we record with you, we're all doing edibles.
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
We're just a bunch of good kids here.
I'm curious. You know, again,
as he takes a sip of his water.
You being millennial / zillennial, whatever.
Young guy.
What do you think? Because we certainly have an opinion about it, of the term Latinx.
Man, you put me on the spot.
That's why you're co-hosting.
Look, I don't get upset with anyone about. It's not my favorite term. For example, I say like, you know, Latino, Latina. There's the argument of you ruin a language. Go.
I'm sorry. Do you hear it a lot in New York?
Yeah, very popular in
People
New York.
do use it a lot in New York.
Yes.
Latinx.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because here it's not popular.
And if it's not, okay. And if that's the way it's changing, then that's the way it's changing. Whatever, so be it. I don't like, yo no me empecino con things like that, you know. But I just say like Latino, Latina because I think people extrapolate, right? Like if you want to say Latinx, say Latinx. But then I know people that are like, no, because then it's like le perre, and you know, like instead of el perro, it's you have to, everything has to be gender neutral.
Well, that's true. You have to.
And
right.
I'm like, okay, I mean, yeah, I get how that would change the entire language, but like Latinx is just like one word, you know. So I don't like get upset about it. What's your like? I assume your opinion is like negative.
Well, it's not that it's negative. I'm on the same boat with you. I'm like, if you like the term and you want to use it and you feel it identifies you, who am I to tell you that not to do it?
I mean, we're rational people here.
More power to you.
There's people that go out of their way to get offended, and that's not me.
No. I don't get offended by it at all. And I've spoken to people who've given me very good reasons why that term resonates with them.
And what are some?
It's gender neutral.
So we'll use the example
inclusive.
Inclusive.
There's a podcast, Spanish Aquí Presents, and I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to it. No. When we were out in LA, we had an interview with them, and one of the guys out there, Oscar, he identifies with it because of that, because he feels like, he identifies as queer, and he doesn't feel that Latino. He feels like that carries a certain connotation that he doesn't feel comfortable, like hyper masculine. And so again, he gave a whole very textured, very nuanced explanation for it, where it was like, you know what, I get it. I get why you feel that way. And again, to Darian's point, I'm not going to tell you like, no, how dare you?
It's just that me personally, I was already using the gender neutral. I would say Latin. I would consider myself a Latin person.
Right. That's already neutral.
I've always said Latin. I've always said Latin. So that's why when that term came out, I was a little puzzled because I was like, I understand what they're trying to do with the term, but I just thought the term already existed with Latin.
Well, yeah, it was like Latin, and then it was that, like at gmail.com that.
Yeah, the arroga.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
exactly.
I actually, even when this whole thing came up, I actually looked up the word Latin on the dictionary because I was like, oh, maybe I don't have the correct meaning. And it is the gender neutral form of Latino or Latina. So I was like, I just find it interesting, I guess, that there's been this whole like introduction of this new term when there kind of already existed a term that meant that.
I guess that's what it is for me. I don't feel strongly one way or the other, but I don't personally identify with it. It didn't come along and I'm like, yes, I need this. This is what I've been waiting for. So, but like to each his own. People say what they want. I'm not going to start a campaign against it. That's just not my jazz. But people do that. What was I going to tell you? After you guys posted something that it was talking about like what is Hispanic versus Latin, Latino, and then
what do you consider yourself, Hispanic or Latino?
Right. And then I looked it up, and it was talking specifically about how, and we have to see the exact thing, but it was like how Latino and Latina are basically Latin persons living in the U.S. But Latin, if you say I'm Latin, that it's not Latino, Latina. It's actually that you're living in Latin America. Mm-hmm. So when you say it's just Latin is just the gender neutral of Latino or Latina, textbook, it actually means something different. It actually means that you're not a U.S. You're not an American.
Well, we could get into this again. I actually have a problem with the whole term Latino. I don't like the term. I actually consider myself Hispanic.
Right.
I don't like the term, and I said this when we talked about it, because that post that we put was pertaining to
A topic of
that podcast, of that episode. I think it was a few episodes back. I've always felt, because when you ask, especially here in Miami, and now that you're in New York, maybe you can you could see the differences. Here in Miami, people are very identifiable from where they're from. I am Cuban. I am Colombian. I am, Venezuelan. I am Honduran, Nicaraguense, whatever. I think people here, and somehow, as, for lack of a better word, Latin community, we mesh and we live in Miami and we're kind of one, but we don't use the term Latino here, and we really don't. And I've never cared for the word, because I always felt that the word kind of washed out the individual identities of each country.
Yeah.
And to me, the word Latino was invented by a white guy in the 1950s for the census.
Was it?
And it was. And I always had that opinion about it, and then I actually looked it up, and it was created by the United States in order to categorize people from Latin America and the Caribbean.
Right.
Because then I started...
That's where that came from. Yeah, so that's why it's different than
people.
Latin.
I started asking people, I'm like, when you were back in your native country, did you consider yourself Latino? No. We had never heard. You were Cuban, you were Venezuelan, you were whatever. We weren't Latino. We were from where we were at. And then I'm like, huh. And then that's when I started doing a little research on it. And yeah, that term was a term used by the U.S. to categorize people from Latin America. And to me, it does a disservice, because you're lumping everybody's culture. Like Mexico has like a very rich, distinctive culture, which is very different from, Venezuelan culture, which is very different from Colombian culture.
I totally agree with you.
Peruvian culture, and we could go on and on and on.
You can't put them in a box.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a whole other conversation, how American society likes to put everything in a box, hence why we made that T-shirt that you probably saw, that we're from the Miami. But I always...
Available for sale on BetterLetMeTellYouShop.com.
But that's why I've always rejected that word, because to me it's like, you're more complex than just this term that somebody categorized us. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of similarities between all these Latin American cultures. I mean, if you really come to think about it, that's what...
Yeah, absolutely.
These were all Spanish colonies that were all, for the most part, Catholic. So obviously, we have all these similarities, but to just put all these countries... And then you start looking at the makeup of the people from Argentina... I mean, are very different than people from Colombia. Again, to the U.S., it's like, oh, you're all like one thing.
And it depends what you're talking about, too, because like if you're talking about just the importance of family, maybe that's more universal. But if you're talking about political stances or cultural customs, like they're so different. And I totally agree with that. And I'll just speak to my experience being in New York. Like I always grew up, this is a little bit different, but I grew up, and I told you, I say, language is important to me. I'm Cuban American, and I make a point to say I'm Cuban American. But, I also grew up with race and ethnicity being mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. Like, my family, we were white Cuban Americans, and that's what it was. Mm-hmm. White and Cuban. In New York, it's like, no, you're not black, you're not white. Like, you're Latino, you're Latino, you're Latino. And that's it. Like, all the Latinos are in that box. Mm-hmm. In Miami, I feel like it is still more of that, not necessarily nuance, but it's more like that more mutual exclusivity of those two terms. Mm-hmm. And even if you look at just the Cuban community, where you live in Miami is more dependent on your race rather than your ethnicity. Because when everyone's the one thing, people differentiate themselves based on another aspect. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a complicated issue, but it could also be like a simple issue at the same time. Because I think that, again, what they've placed all these countries in, all of the Latin American countries in, as defined by one box or one label, because, again, we're obsessed with labels here, it makes it so much more complex than it really should be. Because you're right. Like, when I was growing up, if you're from Cuba, you're either white or black.
Right.
But you were Cuban.
Yeah.
Like that episode of Que Pasa USA.
Yeah.
when you had the black guy come in, the black American guy and the black Cuban guy, and they're like, well, but he's Cuban. Like, because you were Cuban above anything else.
Think of like the standardized tests or equal employer job application. They ask you, it's race and ethnicity were separate. So I would say white, Hispanic, Latino, yes. And yeah.
No, and I always tell people, I'm like, I don't like that term, not because I want to be like Anglo. I have no interest in being white. Like white in terms of the definition of the United States. Like culturally, I have no interest in being white. But it's just at the same time, I think that does a huge disservice to all these Latin American countries that have all these different cultures and all these different people and all these different backgrounds, that we are all painted as one. Like it's a total homogenization of such, like intense and rich cultures. That's the way that I.
And when you think about the census in the 50s, I mean, maybe there was a justifiable argument for it back then, but today we have the technology to. We don't need to have an all-encompassing term like that. I don't think anymore.
And I think that especially if you are, whether either born here, this is just my opinion, whether you're either born here or you're naturalized, I think you should be an American of blank, whatever heritage or whatever descent, an American of Cuban descent, an American of Mexican descent, an American of whatever. Yeah, it's super complicated. Like
very complicated. And the words we use are important.
Yeah,
I think.
And I feel that nobody has a right answer, and
certainly we're not going to do it in the hour and a half we've been talking. So.
But we love everybody.
That's
the important thing.
Fill out the census, guys. Fill out your census. I actually did mine yesterday. It's super easy. They send it to you now.
Oh no, it's mandatory.
Yeah, but so is jury duty. Nobody goes to that.
And for yourself, I believe in civic duty.
I mean, yes,
don't put yourself. You're putting this on the record.
I've served on a jury. Okay. I actually served on a jury before. I got chosen. It was like a week and a half. But we all know that there are people who just throw the letter away. So
those are other people.
Not us. But you get it in the mail. Literally, you just go online. If it took me all of 15 minutes, it was too long. So do the census, people.
Yeah. Bueno, Chris. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Yes.
This was some good talk.
It was. Now, we end every show with our last soda of the desert, which is we give it to, a person, place, thing, or what have you, who is doing something cool, or sometimes it's a gasless soda for people who are doing something shitty. So, in this case, though, we would like to give our decidedly not flat soda to you.
For being our co-host.
And also for, again, for just really taking it upon yourself to say, you know what, there's a lot of history out there that needs to be remembered and not forgotten. And we are big fans of that. We're huge fans of, if you don't, what is it? Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And you are really taking it upon yourself to make sure that people get information. Whether they use it or not is on them. But that's very commendable, because nobody's making you do it. This was something que te nació. You felt it in your heart, in your soul, and keep doing what you do, man.
And you're tremendo cubanazo.
Yeah,
seriously, guys. I appreciate that.
Seriously, like legit.
Yeah, like you're third generation, like tremendo cubanazo.
You can take the guy at a Hialeah, but you can't take the Hialeah.
That is true.
Like he should be on air with Lucy Lopez.
Yeah.
Like
I would love to meet Lucy Lopez.
She's a doll. She's an absolute pleasure.
So thank you so much, and everybody out there. We hope our motto is listen, laugh, and learn, and especially now with everything that's going on with the coronavirus, we hope we could make you laugh, make you think for a little bit. Everybody out there, stay safe. We'll get through this. We're literally all stuck in this together. Literally. So
support your local businesses, guys, if at all possible.
Order takeout.
Target,
Walmart, McDonald's, they'll be fine
survive
after this. But local businesses are not. This can kill them.
I know people are scared, but if you've got an extra like $5 and you want to order a shirt from like a Martha of Miami or something like that, every little bit helps.
So as always, grab your pastelito, your croqueta, and your jupiña, and thank you so much for joining us. That was episode 102.
Yes, it was.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Mi gente, cuídense. Pero Let Me Tell You is co-hosted by Darian Borges and Ismaeliano, produced by Ismaeliano, and our theme, Pero Let Me Tell You Freestyle, is composed by Michael Angelo Lomlaplex, the official gay guy. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes.